Everybody was kung fu fighting. Those kids were fast as lightning.
All right, so today's session is verbal Jiu Jitsu. It's a sequel to the Socratic sales system that we talked about last month. And starting off, an objection is not a rejection, it is merely a request for more information. That's the second slide there. And that's really what this is about, is as salespeople, when we're dealing in sales situations, we have to get more information. We need to find out what it is exactly that's motivating these people, what's behind their motivations and their desires, and what's going on with them so that we can sell them. And so the first part of this session is going to be on what they're saying and what they really mean. And so just a quick review of the hands. So we've got the system, the way it works is you've got the right hand, which is what the prospect says, and then you've got the left hand, which is what your response is. And so going from off the top of my head, since I have memorized this now, you've got the first one, which is too much, too many, too expensive. Then you've got nouns, verbs. Your ring finger is, don't tell me.
That's your
Noun.
noun. Oh, I'm sorry. Index is noun.
Index, yeah, it goes a little backwards from hand to hand, but 4 words, should, shouldn't, must, can't, or what I like to refer to as negatives. I've kind of honed it down a little bit into one-word things because it makes it a little easier to memorize. And then universals, words like always, every, and never. And then those correspond to, on your other hand, compared to what? That's very important because we need to know what people are comparing something to. If you're comparing it to nothing, then that's not a valid statement. There's nothing there. So we have to find out specifically what are you comparing it to. The next one, your index finger, is going to be the question, what specifically? And that's in response to nouns. Middle finger is how specifically, which is in response to verbs on your middle finger on your other hand. And then the ring finger is what would happen if, what would cause you to, and what would prevent you from. And then the last one being always, every, and never. And the way these two work together is essentially that you bounce between fingers. So if someone says compared, triggers the compared to what idea, which is it's too expensive, your product is too expensive, compared to what? As John was bringing up earlier, everybody does this. Everybody. And so the whole idea is you're bouncing back and forth between your hands. And the card here that I've given you actually lays out for you. The front and back side has the left and right hands laid out for you. And the key to the system really is in memorization of it and knowing how to apply it instantly in all of your persuasion techniques and situations where you have to deal with that. So that, in a nutshell, is a quick recap of the Socratic sales system. If you have more questions about that, we won't have a whole lot of time to dig into that, but I did want to touch on it today. And of course, if you have more questions about it, I'm always happy to discuss things in a one-on-one or something later. So, moving forward with the new stuff, verbal Jiu Jitsu. Now we're going to have essentially 4 key principles. Much like any martial art, there's going to be an ethos, ground rules, things that you do. And so we've got 4 basic ground rules here. Now the key thing to understand is that the Socratic sales system and verbal jiu-jitsu only work on qualified prospects. Now if you've got someone in front of you that's not serious and has no intention of using your services to begin with, all of the verbal trickery in the world, all of the persuasion techniques aren't going to work because they have zero interest in your business, zero interest in your products or services. So if this system isn't working for you, then you need to really sit down and ask yourself, why am I sitting down in front of this person wasting time with them, honestly? Because they're not a qualified prospect to begin with, and we as salespeople, we really only have time for qualified prospects. If you're sitting there chasing around unqualified leads and trying to convince them against all odds that they should be using your services, it's a real waste of time. And so if this system does fail you, then the question is, chances are they're probably not a qualified prospect. Now, principle number 2, the Socratic sales system is universal. It can be applied in any situation that you run into, be it with a spouse or my girlfriend, as I mentioned, with children. Anybody that you need to persuade or bring to your side of the table, that's when you can use the Socratic sales system. Verbal Jiu-Jitsu, however, is very situational. It's designed to be used in specific circumstances. It's a structure, a path, a system that you follow. And then I'll be laying out, there's 4 katas, as I call them, in that we'll be going over in this mentoring session. And then the last principle of the verbal jiu-jitsu is don't put your fingers in my chili. Now, if I'm cooking you a great batch of sales chili, don't put your fingers in there. Don't throw bananas in there. Don't add anything to it. Just try it, see if you like it, and then adjust later. Salt and season to taste. But first, let the system work and give it a chance. And so try things as I'm laying them out for you, and then as you learn the system, you'll learn how to apply it better to your exact situation. So just keep that in mind as we move forward. So, kata. Kata is actually the Japanese word for form. Anytime you've seen a martial arts movie and you see them doing the long, drawn-out sequences and steps of moves, that's a kata. And essentially, the purpose of it is to learn moves and structures and things of that nature so that you're fluent when it comes time for combat or time to defend yourself. You don't have to sit there and question what moves you're doing. You just do the kata or the form. And so, as that applies to what we're talking about today, these forms that I'm giving you, you'll memorize them, and then you'll be able to apply them in your sales situations flawlessly, and you'll have a much better effect with it. So just like a martial artist will use a kata, practice it over and over again until they have the moves memorized, it's the same thing with this system. It'll do you no good if you have to look back, and that's why I created the cards, so you can help study and learn the system better. But if you're sitting with a prospect and having to look at, okay, kata 1, the setup, not going to work. So the whole purpose of this is to learn the form and memorize it. And so the first kata that I wanted to share with you is the setup. This is designed to be used at the beginning of your presentation. And the way you can think of the relationship between the Socratic sales system and verbal jiu-jitsu is that verbal jiu-jitsu is the structure, if you will. The Socratic sales system can be used within verbal jiu-jitsu. So, for instance, the setup that I'm teaching you now, that is going to be used at the very beginning of a presentation. Now, through the course of your presentation, you may run into objections, and that's when the Socratic sales system pops up. You can use that to deal with the objections that you're faced with. You can also use the Socratic sales system completely separate from verbal jiu-jitsu, but they go hand in hand pretty much. And so, whenever you start off a presentation, consider saying this. If you felt you could have benefit number 1, benefit number 2, and benefit number 3, would you take specific action? Applying that to my business, that would be if you felt you could cut the fat, waste, and frustration out of your marketing dollars, making your marketing more effective without struggling and spending time on it, would you sit down with me and have a one-on-one? That's a way that I can apply that form to my business. Now, there's a few ways you can use this. So you could also say, if you could see yourself gaining benefit number 1, 2, and 3, would you take this action? Or if you said to yourself. Now, the key thing about the phraseology on these is that people communicate in different ways. And if you look at it, the first question, that's going to be applying to a kinesthetic person. Someone that is tactile, feels. If you could see yourself, that's a visual. Someone that sees things and wants to see results, wants to see things personally with their naked eye to understand and believe it. Said, that's auditory. That's an auditory person, someone that's going to learn via hearing things. And then the last one here, if someone you really respected told you could actually. The key to that one is that oftentimes when we sell, we're not just selling that person. We're selling their friends. We're selling their spouse, their children. We're selling the people that are directly related to that person that can kill the sale. So if someone feels that, well, I really want your product or service, I think it's great, but they're thinking to themselves, if I come home with this brand new red sports car and my wife sees it, she's going to kill me. So you also have to understand that we have to sell them based on not only what they want, but also what the people around them are going to be saying to them about that purchase, because they're not going to buy from you if they're going to be made the fool.
What was the second one again? What kind of person was that?
If you could see you, that's a visual person. And so you can also target and determine how people are based on the words they tell you. So if they say, I just don't feel that this is a good fit for me, that's a kinesthetic person. I don't see how I can gain benefit number 1, 2, and 3. Visual person. And so you want to pay attention to keywords that people give you that clue you into the type of way they need to be sold. And so a lot of this is adjusting for that person. So that's the setup. So at the beginning of your presentation, you want to go ahead and say that. And the key is your benefits are what are going to appeal most to that person. You can design benefits on price, on customer service, on things you don't do that other companies do, on things you do that other companies don't do. There's a lot of ways to describe benefits that will be appealing to a target prospect. And so moving forward, the psychology of this is that your presentation needs to focus on those 3 benefits that we're talking about. Yeah, you're about 3 or 4 more pages forward. And so that whole presentation should be crafted to demonstrate how you give them benefit number 1, benefit number 2, and benefit number 3. Now, if you the way the structure works, if someone says yes to you after you ask that question, if I could give you benefit number 1, 2, and 3, would you be interested? And someone says yes, then you've got them sold. All you've got to do is demonstrate those benefits to them. Because they've already told you up front at the beginning of the presentation, I would be interested if you can demonstrate these benefits to me. And so while we're moving forward through this, another key thing to remember is that since people never say what they mean, you always want to bypass the first objection, meaning that whatever objection they give you initially, that's probably not the real objection. And so you want to keep that in mind and be digging for what the true objection is. Someone that says it's too expensive, yes and no. I mean, if you compare that to the benefits that you can give them or what they'll lose by not using your product or service, I think that changes the equation. And so ultimately, people will only buy for 2 reasons. One is to gain a benefit. The second is to avoid a loss. And so in the process of your presentation, you want to show them how they're going to gain that benefit, 1, 2, and 3, or how they're going to avoid some type of loss. That's really the key thing. In all of this, these structures are designed to sell the person in their own mind, to work them through the process so that when it comes time to close, that you're not going to get, well, I have to think about it. Because the way this structure works is we've worked them through them thinking about it in their mind already. They've already made buying decisions in their mind. So moving forward to the second kata, the close. So you start off your presentation with the question about the benefits, and then when it comes time to deliver your close, now this isn't the close, but it's right before you deliver that close. And so you might say, Mr. and Mrs. Prospect, you will always be glad you took action today. I don't believe you'll find anyone that will work more diligently to provide you with benefit number 1. You have to forgive me, I still have a little bit of a cold. Benefit number 1, benefit number 2, and benefit number 3, which I know you want. Isn't that right? Now, the way that you phrase this, and you notice the tonality in my voice, that's all very important. Now, this might seem a little pushy, but the fact of the matter is, you asked them at the beginning of your presentation if they would be interested if you could demonstrate these 3 things. And if your presentation is designed to demonstrate those 3 things, then you should get a yes response to that every time, as long as the whole structure is sound. Now, if they say yes, that's when you kick in the close. Fine. For me to represent you, in your case, for me to represent you as your financial advisor, I need some more information. Would you want 1 or 2? Now, the 1 or 2, that more applies to a product, if you're selling a product or service. But the key thing is that's a yes or yes close. Would you want 1 or 2? It's not a yes, no. There's no option there but other, oh, well, I want 2. And so, now if you get a no response at this point, we want to keep in mind that the issue is that this should be a qualified prospect. And if you've done your work right, then you should get yes. Now, if you get a no, it could be that they're not a qualified prospect. But the key thing is we need to isolate the objection. We need to go back to knowing when we know that people never say what they mean, and so we need to find out what is the real objection there. And that's where you can trigger back into the Socratic sales system by ferreting out those objections and working through your hands. Now, once you have, or another approach you can take is, well, if they give you an objection, then you can say, well, if I could answer these issues for you, would you be willing to move forward? Very simple. Once again, we're asking questions here. And then you're getting them to commit essentially by saying, well, yes, I mean, if you could, if they're throwing too expensive at you, well, if I could answer the problem of it being too expensive for you, would you be willing to move forward? No. Okay, what else would prevent you then from? Because we want those objections, we want them out there in the open for us to see. So that's the phraseology of the first of the kata 2, which is the close. And so like I said, there's the opening, the setup, and then the close, which is, Mr. and Mrs. Prospect, you will always be glad you took action today. I don't believe you'll find anyone that will work more diligently to provide you with, which is what I know you want. And so remember that kind of tonality that I'm using there. And then once you drop that on them, they say yes, straight into close. And remember, from the first Socratic sales system, we did no discussion about closing, none whatsoever. So that's what this form is for, is driving it into the close. Now, as I said, you may get multiple objections, and so if you do, you can ask, well, in addition to it being so expensive, are there any other reasons why you wouldn't want to take action today? Let's say they tell you, I don't like the color. Okay, well, in addition to it costing too much and the fact that you don't like the color, if I was able to resolve those issues for you, would you be willing to move forward? Once again, we're just asking questions here. Nothing, confrontational about that. Another nice little trick about that is, let's say you want to isolate as many objections as possible. Let's say they keep giving you objections, like they come up with 3, 4, 5 objections. That shouldn't happen, but if it does, that tends to make me think that maybe they're not really a qualified prospect. But let's say they are a qualified prospect and they give you a list of objections. Write them down on a piece of paper in front of them. Work your way through each objection using the Socratic sales system and cross it off. And then as you work through your list of objections, you can ask them, well, have I answered that objection for you? Have I resolved that issue? And when they give you permission and say yes, then you can just cross that off the list. And it's very powerful if you do that with a list format in front of them, because they can see you checking off their objections and clearing them out of the way. Very powerful stuff. And it also sells them because, they, like I said, they see that and it has a psychological effect on them because they're giving you permission to cross off the objection. You've dealt with the objection. And so that really prevents you from getting into a game where, and I'm sure this has happened to us all, where you deal with an objection, but then like, oh, well, this. And then you deal with that objection, oh, well, this. And so it prevents that whole game from even occurring. Now, one thing to remember in kata number 2 here is that the one objection you can't bypass is, I think you're too pushy. If they feel that you're being pushy as a salesman, then that's different territory that you're getting into. Now, you can still use kata number 1, which is, and you just lower your voice, you pause, take a deep breath, and so you could say, you'll always be glad you took action today. And once again, I mean, you're putting the ball right back in their court. Now, you can also use kata number 1 in response to, they say you're too pushy. Well, if you could see yourself gaining benefit number 1, 2, and 3, would you take action? And so, once again, it's just your voice, your tonality, the way you're communicating with people.
So not pushy.
Exactly. Exactly. And I mean, a lot of this is, it's a structure, and obviously we're selling within a structure, but there's no need to be pushy, and we'll get into this a little further in the presentation. But really, it's for their best good. That's the way I look at things when we're selling, is that we need to sell people because it's in their best interest. And so there's a couple ways you can deal with that, and then I'll deal with specifically how to depressure people if you get that objection later in the presentation. Now, this next one, so those two are designed to be used, the kata number 1 and 2 are designed to be used at the beginning of the presentation and the end of the presentation. They bookended. And so that's the whole structure for using those two together. They work together. The other 2 katas are completely independent of the first 2, but they use the same type of language. Kata number 3 can be used when you're prospecting someone. And so let's say you're in a one-on-one and you want to shift into maybe a sales mode or some other situation. Then may I ask you for permission to ask you a question? No one's going to say no to that. And so you're also getting them into an agreeing frame of mind with you. And it's important because you're keeping the power on that side. They've got all the power in this situation. All you're doing is asking questions. They're free to say no at any time. It just so happens that the structure we're working with, if they're a qualified prospect, they won't say no. And so they say yes. Once again, if you could see yourself getting benefit number 1, benefit number 2, benefit number 3, would you take a specific action? That simple. You're asking for permission, and then it's a different form of the first kata. Now, once again, you can see a couple other versions here. If you said to yourself, or if someone you really respected told you, once again, taking different plays on that. And those can be used based on your own personal preference, which one of those 3 you would like to use, or based on what type of communicator that you think that they are. So it's really, there is some latitude in the system on how you approach people. Now, the psychology behind all this, looks like I've got a missing slide in there, or the wrong slide.
There's psychology there.
Is it?
Oh.
Yeah, and I did that on one of the other pages on one of the handouts. But once again, the psychology behind all of this is that we are prospecting them. Yeah, do we have it over here? No. Okay. But once again, we're keeping the ball in their court. We're asking for their permission. And since you're putting them in that situation, you never really should run into a lot of objection or a lot of difficulty with this portion of the system. And essentially, it's all there for you. You just have to run through the layout. And that's why I've also provided the card, because you can follow the card. And once you have kind of the structure of this down, it's only a few little words and things that you're throwing into your overall presentation that's built around that idea. So kata number 4, which is depressure. Now, the one thing in this system that you have to be really careful about is that you're being too pushy. I haven't ever actually gotten that using this system, but when you do run into that, it's something that you have to be very wary of, because someone that's in that position, it's very easy to lose the sale at that point. And so someone tells you you're being too pushy using this system. Well, I'm not here to pressure you into making a bad decision. I'm here to give you enough information that you need to make a good decision. You get to make the decision. Fair enough? You notice once again, very calm, lowered intonation. Fair enough. Always ending with questions here. All we're doing is asking questions. Another one that might work with your personality a little better, the very last thing I would want to do is pressure you into making a bad decision. However, if it is a good decision, you would want to take action, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I'm thinking the pressure word might be on a negative. Maybe change that word too, depending on the person.
Yeah, and a lot of this would be parroting back what they said. So let's say, if they say you're literally being too pushy, well, I'm not here to be pushy.
Yeah.
Or, whatever phraseology they're using. It's always powerful to reiterate what they said, because all too often people think that people don't listen. They think that they just move forward with what they want to say, don't listen to their objections, or don't answer them properly. I mean, that's understandable when people say, they give an objection. Well, I understand that, but X, Y, Z, and then they move on. But have they really answered that objection for the people? And so the key thing about all this is the tonation and repeating back the words that they've said so they know that successful communication is going on here. So that's a great depressure statement that you can use at any time people feel that you're being too strong with how you're approaching them. And on the psychology of the depressure, once again, it's about the highest good. I mean, all too often, take, for instance, Harry today in his presentation. He says, he just do cars, or he just does this, that, or the other. But the thing that we need to remember is the highest good that we do for people. I mean, sure, Harry fixes cars, but Harry also makes sure that families can get from destination A to B safely, conveniently, fast, without any fear of injury or harm or being stuck. He protects families. He does all kinds of things beyond just repairing your car. And, honestly, the advice that he gives people on repairing their cars, they should follow that, because if they don't, they could end up with more costly repairs. They could end up stranded somewhere. I mean, God knows what could happen if you're on a family trip, traveling 1,000 miles and get stranded in some remote location because you didn't check your oil. I mean, that's horrible. So we all need to think about our businesses in the highest good. I mean, the way I think about my business, I'm sure I help people make money marketing. Yeah, that's one thing I do. The other thing I look at it is I help people build successful businesses so they can attain their dreams. I help people send their children to college. I help people go on vacations. I help people attain financial freedom. I mean, there's all kinds of things that I do beyond writing a sales letter, designing a business card, whatever. And so if we're really good at what we do and what we offer people, then we have an obligation to that person to sell them. And think about that. That's a shift in the perspective that people have about salesmen. I mean, what are some of the perspectives you think that you hear about salesmen in sales, or business in general, in media or in the world today? I'm just kind of wondering.
It's like a used car salesman. They only sell used car, and they're not going to let you walk out of there unless they sell you one. So if you're so geared into what you're doing and not what the person wants per se, you're going to send them away, because they're going to say, well, you're only listening to what you want to, or what you think I want to hear, and not what I'm saying. So
Definitely. And I think that's a great point to bring up, because active listening, I mean, truly listening to what someone is telling you and hearing what they're saying and thinking about it, is a rare skill today. I mean, with all the noise going on, I really think people talk at each other and not to each other, not with each other.
yeah,
And I mean, half the time, people might be hopping on their cell phone, texting, Facebooking, doing whatever while you're talking with them. I mean, you can certainly see that in the youth today. I know Andrea's daughters are guilty of that. Time I'll be talking with them, and then up comes the phone. It's hello, And so active listening is a big part of it, and I think there is a lot of negativity towards sales in general. And in fact, I touched on this in the first session, that people are trained to say no. I mean, people are trained to be negative in a sales situation. Just like we train to sell people, customers are trained to say no. And so we have to overcome that situation in a sales. So, close number one. And there is a book full of closes by Zig Ziglar called Secrets of Closing the Sale that lists probably 200 closes. So I just grabbed a couple real quick, different types of closes you can use. But that book, if you really want to improve your sales, I would really suggest buying a copy of that book. It's still in print. You can get it at Barnes & Noble. But essentially, Secrets of Closing the Sale by Zig Ziglar. But essentially, this is the tangible to intangible close. Now, I don't have specific verbiage for this, but the key thing is that, let's say you're selling a timeshare. And so what you're selling them, essentially, the tangible is a weekend in the timeshare. I mean, that's the tangible. You have a set amount of time in this place that you can have so many times per year. Now, that's not very motivating to me, telling you, well, you'll have, a 2,000 square foot home that you can use for 48 hours. Not very motivating there. And certainly you're not going to get many timeshares sold in that way. So how they sell the timeshare is they sell the intangible. They sell, let's say the timeshare is on a lake, this beautiful lake with a golf course right around the corner. They're selling the view. They're selling the serenity. They're selling the idea that you can take your family there, get away from all the hustle and bustle of life. That's the intangible, and that's what sells timeshares. It's not 2,000 square feet for 48 hours. So anytime you can shift from the tangible in your business to the intangible, once again, talking about that highest good, you can see how that kind of plays in there, then you're going to be able to close them much better. And it's far more compelling to focus on the intangible than the tangible. Something you can put your hand on is nowhere near as powerful as an idea. And so keep that in mind, because the switching from the tangible to the intangible will give you a better close, and it will give you a higher increased or perceived value of your products and services. And once again, these closes would be brought in specifically in this structure. You use kata number 1, which is the setup. You give your presentation. You use kata number 2, which is the close, and then you actually use the close. So kata number 2 is really just, it's that moment before you strike with the close that you use that. And these are an example of closes you can use. Close number 2, you deserve this. This type of close is really good for high dollar, expensive items, cars, homes, that type of thing. And it's purely focused on the hard work someone has put in to get to this point in their life, which is why it works really well with high dollar or more expensive items. And so you might say, all of your life, Mr. Prospect, you've worked hard, made the right decisions, and lived frugally. You owe it to yourself to enjoy the fruits of your labors. It's that simple. And so you're basically laying out why they should make a buying decision based on the fact that they've worked so hard. And that's really complimentary because you're basically telling them, you've worked hard, you made the right decision. You know, you're basically building up their ego there, really. And so that's a great close to toss in on high dollar items. And that book, Secrets of Closing the Sale, literally has over 100 closes in it, of which these are just 2 that I can remember that I thought of off the top of my head. And of course, we mentioned earlier in the presentation the yes or yes close that I brought up. And so moving on to miscellaneous debris. These are kind of some more randomized items. Those are the key of the system right there that I've laid out for you. The 4 katas, which is the setup, the close, power prospecting, and depressure. And then you've got your 2 closes. And that's what's on this sheet, the second handout that I gave you, the peach one. And so that right there is the whole structure of the system of which the Socratic sales system can be plugged into. So they work hand in hand like that. Now, I tell people when you're dealing with this system, the fruit is at the end of the branch, and you've got to put yourself out there to grab it. And so it may feel a little uncomfortable applying this type of sales. It may feel manipulative. But once again, returning back to the highest good, it's not manipulative if you're moving people towards what's best for them, in my opinion. It would be manipulative if you felt that you were doing something that was not right for your client. Then that would be manipulative. But we are honestly trying to move them to a buying decision which will give them the benefits 1, 2, and 3 that we've stated. So ultimately, you're going to have to kind of push past that idea and the negativity that surrounds sales and just move forward with getting through that because it is what's best for the prospect or client. And you'll also see, and we discussed this in a previous session, CSP, Communication, Sales, and Persuasion, the idea that communication is only 7% of the words you say, 38% the tonality, and 55% the body language. Now, the words, that's what we're laying out here for you. And the nice thing, though, is that this structure is, I think it's more powerful, and it really leverages that 7% that you get for your words. Tonality, I mean, you saw how I was using the tone of my voice and changing it. And that's very important because, honestly, to control a sales situation, you have to control your own emotions. You know, if you start getting flustered every time someone throws, it's too expensive at you, I mean, it makes me laugh. It's too expensive. You're not even thinking about what we're talking about here. It's too expensive. So that's a really big part of it. And then the body language side of things we actually covered in CSP. That would have been probably 6 months ago now that mentoring session was held. And if people are interested in getting copies of that, I can bring that as well. But that actually, between Socratic Sales 1, Verbal Jiu Jitsu, and CSP, that is actually the whole arc of that communication theory. So just keep in mind that your words can be powerful or they can be powerless. And it all depends on how you present yourself with it. Once again, also, the tone that you use, because you're going to be setting the tone for the prospect that is you're trying to sell. And so managing your emotions, managing your tone, and working through a system like this will put you in a very strong position to make sure that what they mirror is your confidence. Another good key about whether or not you're doing well in your presentation is whether or not people like to engage you in talking with you or talking more. If they start taking over the conversation, let them. That's a good sign that they are interested and engaged in what you have to say. And ultimately, the way I also look at things is selling serving, persuading. They're all the same thing. I mean, and if you think about it, raising children, you're selling them or persuading them on the proper values and morals that you feel they need to have to be successful in life. And if you apply that to this whole discussion of sales, isn't that exactly what we're doing in our presentations? We're selling people on the value of your services, the benefits that you bring to the table, and what you think you can do for them. Miscellaneous debris 2, there's a great one on here that I want to talk about. Feel, felt, found. Awesome verbiage there. So, someone throws an objection at you and says, I don't have the time to deal with this system. Well, I understand that. I feel the same way. And let's see, feel.
Yep, you got it.
Yeah, okay. I feel the same way, and I felt in the past that same way, but I found since then that XYZ. And so with the feel part, you're acknowledging their emotions, and you're telling them, I have felt the exact same way as you, and I found. And so it's a verbiage that you can use in an objection or any other time that helps bring people once again to your side of the table. Another great one that you can try just for fun is if someone throws you the "it's too expensive" line, instead of saying "compared to what," or if they kind of jump at a price, like let's say that you give the price and they're kind of like, oh, what's wrong? Is it too low? Because when people object to price, it could be too low, it could be too high. We don't know until we ask.
I get that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I charge $45 for them. They're like,
yeah, is it?
tips accepted.
Yeah, is it too low? I mean, we assume on the negative side of things that, our prices must be too high. Why? It could be too low. And why not ask them that? And so that's just a fun one to throw out there that I've done before, and people are like, because we want to shock people out of that rote response that people are giving us. Yeah, I mean, seriously, because we automatically jump to that idea that it's got to be too expensive, but it doesn't have to be, not at all. And so also a word about scripts. Scripts are great. I use scripts I actually follow a script for my referral. Anytime I get a referral, I follow my script when I call them. And I just say that, scripts are not bad things. If they weren't good, then, we wouldn't go to the movies. And movies are all about scripts. I mean, that's where every movie comes from, is a script. They follow the script and they make money with it. And so why not do the same in your business? Also, when somebody asks you to do something, try saying, consider it done. That simple. Very powerful. Very powerful. I've used that one a few times with my girlfriend. She asked me to do something, consider it done. That simple. And you can just wipe that right off your plate when someone says that. Another good question, tell me what's going on with X. If you're at a point in your presentation and you're stalled or you might have issues about, tell me what's going on, or ask them, what is your impression about my industry? That's a great thing to ask people too, because it sets up their stereotypes so that you can then get down to the brass tacks and deal with it. And that is the rough circles of all that I had to talk about on that. And then at this point, I also want to sit down and take a look at, would someone like to work through exercises on developing what your benefit number 1, number 2, and number 3 might be, or deal with questions about kind of the information? I know I went through it pretty quickly, but I wanted to make sure that I got through all of the key parts of this, because there is so much in the system to go through. So were there questions, or would anybody like some help developing what their benefits might be? And if not, then we can call it a day as well.
I think you did a good job. It reminded us of things that we have heard before, and just refreshes our memory on how to apply it in the future. I think it's good.
Yeah, and once again, the key to the whole system is the memorization side of it and actually working through the process. But it is a sales system. And like I said with the chili, try it out, see if it fits, and if it doesn't, then revamp the system. But at least try the system out for how it is and see how it does apply to your business. But the way you can really think about it is that the Socratic sales system is the hanger. Verbal Jiu Jitsu is the coat that you hang over it. So you can use verbal jiu-jitsu as a structure, and then Socratic sales within that structure. And just keep that in mind in all of your sales situations. And like I said, the verbal jiu-jitsu doesn't fit necessarily in every situation, but clearly the Socratic sales system is applicable to that. And so really, if you try that, work through the system, let the system work for you.
Yeah, in the last week, I've had 3 different realtors call me and asking me to help. The deal's about to blow. They're complaining about the carpet or the windows or something, so they'll call me, and then I'll just talk to the person and just sort of reassure them that it was a good deal. That why they're asking the carpet cleaner to do this, I'm not quite sure. But 3 deals that were going to blow in the last 2 weeks were saved just because they knew I'm good with and talking to people. So they had me just talk, reassure the folks, and then they went ahead and closed. They were all delayed closings, but it happened. But a lot of this stuff is just you'll pick up naturally as you're in sales.
Mm-hmm.
You're changing the tone, listening to the customers' complaints or what have you. Coming back with a positive. I mean, a lot of this stuff, I know it's not natural, but it will become natural as you continue to use it because it works in anything. Like you were talking about with your girlfriend. Mm-hmm. You do it.
Yeah. At least, I'll have to wait probably another month or 2 before I try it again. But, yeah.
And because we're always dealing with people, and people are people. And it doesn't matter what group, what age, people want to be heard. Like I'll always give salespeople a hard time. Not a hard time, but I'll go in and say, "What are you going to do to make me happy?" And I'll just walk right up into that, and they'll always take a percentage off immediately. I mean, when I can even go into Walmart and we get a manager over here.
Yeah.
If you ask for something, and so then they have to either. Then they have to make a decision. Are they going to bend and give a 10 or 20% discount, or are they going to try to sell me on the value of that TV? Mm-hmm. Well, most employees aren't going to.
Yeah,
they don't care.
Yeah, they're going to take the easy route.
Yeah.
And most managers, because I used to work for Walmart, the minute that you ask for them, automatically ask, hey, can you knock 10% off of this? Because that's what they're authorized to do.
They always can.
Right off the top, that's something that they can do without even having to, think twice about that. Yeah, we can take 10% off of that. And they'll march you right up to the cashier and say, hey, this is what the price is, and they'll do the override right then and there. So, yeah. I was
buying a printer one time, and I couldn't make a decision. I was at Office Depot or something, and I like this. The salesperson had been there to help me, and I was having trouble, and I was ready to. I walked out the door without buying one because I couldn't make a decision, and I thought if that guy had just picked up the box and said, "Can I take this? This is the one you've been staring at for 30 minutes." And he just took it to the register, I would have bought it. Because I went back and got it later after going to 3 other stores and realizing it was the best deal. Mm-hmm. But all he would have had to do is make one move. And then it would have saved my time because I was going to buy anyway. It is a service like you were saying. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be going there if I wasn't going to buy something.
Definitely.
And so when they call you into their house, they're going to buy. Or when they come into your office, they want to buy. They're going to buy from somebody. So I just assume it's going to be me, and you assume that sale.
Definitely, and that's definitely the attitude that I take into sales. Is that the confidence? Because like I said, the prospect's going to mirror what you put out there, and they're going to see what you represent. And so just by virtue of the way I dress and the way I act. When I come into a sales situation, people are going to respect me. They're going to look at me as a professional. And it doesn't matter. My life could be a wreck 5 minutes before I walked in that door. But because of what I represent to the client or the prospect, they're going to see that in me, regardless of whether or not it's there. And so that's kind of a way to think about things. And also, a nice little tactic to use too, if you're having trouble getting at someone's objections, don't be afraid to ask them, "Is it me?" And then silence. It could be you. It could not be. But the fact of the matter is you're doing nobody any good by leaving a sales situation, taking the objections they give you at face value.
I had a guy call me from Peyton, and he said, I have to, I'm moving into a house, the trucks are coming, he's a retired military guy, his final move or whatever, and then he said, how much would it be? And I could tell it seemed like sticker shock, and I'm not even all that high. And I said, what did you expect? He goes, well, Sears is going to do it for, $140. I said, there's no way. I said, they're sending a $10 an hour guy out there. I said, I come. And then I showed the value. Well, I got like $150 more than Sears was going to get because I just showed the value of me doing it. And I went and did the job. Instead of saying, oh, I'll cut my price down to them, it's not worth my time. It's just not worth.
You don't want to be the lowest cost provider in your industry ever. Honestly, there's no money in that. But I think you also hit a great point there, too, and what did you expect? That's actually something I've used in systems before, too, where if someone does give you that shock, well, what were you expecting? And then they tell you. And then, of course, it's very good to do analysis and reading into what your competition, what their prices are, what their offerings are. So when you are in that situation and you say, well, what were you expecting? I was expecting XYZ. Well, I provide this service. I know there are other people out there that provide this level of service and charge this amount, but this is what I provide. This is what I do. I'm different than them. And simply by knowing what your competition charges, what they provide for that service, puts you in a unique position to come back with information that's going to benefit them. And most likely they're much better off going with your products and services based on the value you provide. So I think all of us, look at our businesses very seriously and look at how we can provide the greatest value to our clients and customers. And I don't think that necessarily everybody in business is that same way.
Well, I like dealing with our group because I trust the people, and I know that they're going to do me good. I've done business with well more than half of the folks in there, and so it's I know if I go to John, he's going to tell me, he's going to shoot straight with me. If I needed a massage, I know, from testimony of experts that it would be that it would work. Sue's done countless things for me, gifts and such. I mean, it all works. Haven't yet had the opportunity to get
in the parking lot more times than not.
Yeah.
The point you're making, though, is that it's hard to put a dollar figure on trust. And that sometimes will usurp a price. If our services are higher, then maybe you can get the lowest bidder. Because the trust relationship is there, you're willing to put that first and then the price second.
You have a difference between a Ford Focus and a Mercedes S-Class. They're both cars.
They are.
Both will get you from point A to B.
Planner, buy the Focus day in and day out. No,
You're ready to go find it on the road dead, right?
No.
But I mean, it's because it's we are value. People want us. They need us. Mm-hmm. They need what we have.
Yeah, and then there's perceived value too. So if you're the lowest, or you say you'll do it for X amount, and they don't see the value in it.
Yeah,
you're
definitely.
Still maybe out of the ballpark.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that we can outprice ourselves, because then we're fools. But like you said, know your competition, know the market. Where do you fit in there? What do you feel that you're really worth? Not just think you're worth, but what are you worth?
Yeah. And don't be afraid to tell people that. I mean, like I said, there's before, because I always hear that Walmart destroys small business and all of that. But the thing about that is that before there was Walmart, there was Kmart. Before Kmart, there was Sears and Roebuck. Before Sears and Roebuck, there's Woolworths. Before Woolworths, I mean, on and on in a long chain. Lowest cost providers do not last, and we will see Walmart leave the market at some point eventually, unless they continue to change and do things differently. And they've actually have opened Walmarts now that are actually geared towards the affluent, where they actually have sushi chefs in the Walmart and things of that nature. And that's how they're going to fend that off. You know, doesn't mean I'm going to be going to Walmart for sushi anytime soon, but
But why do people like the small business? They like the small business because they know who owns it, or they know the service that they're going to get, and they're willing to go there because they appreciate the service. One of the examples in big business, I used to really like Home Depot, but in the 90s they did very poor on customer service. And I started to go to Lowe's instead because the shelves were more organized, and there seemed like there was more customer support people walking around.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the Home Depot has really done a strategic change. Now when you go in, you can't even get through the door without seeing somebody handing you a flyer when you walk
Yeah,
in.
exactly.
And help you find something. And then when you walk down there, even though it isn't that much more organized, they have lots of people, staff, that are looking to try to help you. And now they've changed my opinion of them, and I usually shop at Home Depot instead. But it doesn't mean that Walmart can't be that customer service provider. But when you think of Walmart, you know it's just a name and number versus, hey, how you doing, Michael? What can I help you find today? You're not going to get that at Walmart, and you probably never will. But you would get it at the local hardware store. If it's Ace, for example. You know, usually that's where you pay for your customer service.
and I tell people, love your clients, love your customers.
Right.
Yep.
I love how you talked about the intangibles. This timeshare, you get 2 weeks a year for 2,000 square feet. Nobody'd want that. But if you get Vegas for 2 weeks,
Yeah, you get
or
the
you
view.
get Florida Keys for 2 weeks, or Hawaii for 2 weeks, this just happens to be the place you stay.
Well, no,
Exactly.
you make a memorable experience with your family.
Yeah.
And when you look at those pictures 5 years from now, that you stayed at your timeshare with your family, and they're 5 years older or whatever, how can you replace that? I can't replace that.
Right.
You can't replace that. That's a memory. And so that's the intangible, right?
Definitely.
Is that you create success.
And also keep in mind that the reason people do business with you or purchase products or services from you may not be the reason you think it is. I mean, honestly, someone might go to you because they want to have a college fund set up or something like that. And that's one way of looking at it. And, you know, another way also might be to look is they're going to you for security. They're going for you to peace of mind. They want to put their mind at ease because they're stressed about not knowing what to do in this market. I mean, selling on experience and all of that is a very important thing too. And give people what they want, because it might not be what you think they want.
Yeah.
So that's a big part of it too.
Michael, we really appreciate you taking the time over this past year or so
It's been my
to do these
pleasure.
things.
It's my pleasure.
It's
You've added a lot of benefit to our group that we couldn't get elsewhere. And
Right.
I think that your work makes our group above and beyond any other group out there. So thank you, Mike.
Well, I think there's a lot of factors that make our group above and beyond anything out there, but I do appreciate that. It's been a blast doing this. I mean, I really have enjoyed it. It's been a bit of work presenting all these and preparing all these items, but I've enjoyed it, and it'll be strange in 3 months, kind of shifting out of the mentoring role and seeing what happens with the group. But you know, I love change, embrace change.
Now, what are we going to do the next 2 months? Because the last parts of the month are both holidays.
Yeah, and actually, I needed to catch up with you about those dates to make sure they
I saw it
work.
already. I saw it in your email. I wrote
Okay.
it. So he sent out an email yesterday.
Yep, the final plat.
So you already have it set.
Yeah, we're running like